Buster Olney joins us. How you doing,
I'm doing
John?
great, Michael.
There he
I'm
is.
doing great. Good to talk with you.
All right, so the moves so far, what do you make of them? What are you most impressed with? Who's made the most impactful move, in your opinion?
Yeah, the Orioles had to get a starting pitcher because they've lost 4 of their 6 starters in their rotation from the beginning of the year. It's part of the reason why, as the Yankees have struggled, it's not like the Orioles have run away with the division. They had to get a starting pitcher. And Zach Eflin is a great plow horse. He's not going to win the Cy Young Award, but he's also someone who's going to consistently give you 6 innings, and that's the sort of guy that they needed. I think that Sir Anthony Dominguez, who they got in that trade with the Phillies, is a good addition. Experience, depth for a bullpen that needed help. And they need, as many guys, I think, as possible who potentially could pitch the 9th inning, because with Craig Kimbrell, you just don't know. At some point, if, as the Phillies learned firsthand last year, you don't know if you're going to wind up having to make a replacement. The Rays are clearly in payroll management mode, even though they're, not far out in the wild card. They're using this opportunity when there are very few sellers in the marketplace to, get value in return for, the likes of Zach Eflin. They're having conversation with other teams about Isaac Paredes and Yandy Diaz. And, of course, last night they traded Randy Rosarena, which was really interesting to me. The Blue Jays have signaled to other teams, look, they're willing to talk about, guys who are under contract through the rest of this year, which is why they just traded Yimi Garcia, who's a valued reliever in this market, to the Seattle Mariners. So, the market was dead until about 24 hours ago, but the realities of the clock are starting to hit the general managers, and moves are being made.
So, Buster, Guerrero and Bichette could be a part of the Toronto fire sale?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
The other teams, I think, have interest in Vladimir Guerrero Jr., but those guys are under contract through 2025, and the Blue Jays have signaled to other teams, that they intend to try to win next year. Even though when you look at the roster, it might make sense to actually try to swap those guys for value now at a time when there are just so few players available in the trade market. But the Blue Jays just went through this expensive renovation of Rogers Center. They've actually drawn pretty well this year, and I think they got to, they feel some pressure to put a representative product out there next year.
All right, so what's out there for the Yankees? I mean, what are they looking at? Is it a big move? Is it a move on the margins? What are you hearing?
Well, the team that I keep watching, and it feels like that there's a fit there, and I wish I could tell you that, more than beyond the fact that they've talked, are the Angels. Carlos Estevez is probably the most valued reliever in the market right now. A guy who could close games. Clay Holmes at some point, faltered. He can be a dominant 7th or 8th inning reliever. He's someone who is going to get moved before the deadline, and he would make a lot of sense for the Yankees. I don't know how you feel, Michael, but to me, their number one need is absolutely bullpen, because that bullpen, you couldn't possibly win in October with that bullpen, and they're going to need a bat, obviously, with the lack of depth in their lineup. And Luis Rengifo just came off the disabled list. I think he could be a good fit. He's had a good year. He's not a superstar player, but he certainly would add to the depth in that lineup, and he could play multiple positions. So I've wondered if those two guys potentially those two teams could go back and forth. Paredes, look, I don't think the Blue Jays, they demonstrated with the Zach Eflin trade. They don't. The Tampa Bay Rays. I don't think the Tampa Bay Rays care about trading in the division. They just traded Zach Eflin to the Orioles. So the idea that Isaac Paredes, potentially could be to the Yankees, or Yandy Diaz to the Yankees, that would not shock me. I will tell you guys that another team that's involved in that in the last day, the Texas Rangers, who are clearly buyers now in this week in which they, had 4 games against the Chicago White Sox. They're just starting a series against the Blue Jays this weekend. Chris Young has told the players he's not going to sell. He's going to buy, even though they're kind of on the fringe of the race in the standings. But I think as defending champions, maybe he just feels like he owes it to the players to make a run at this thing, and they believe that they're better than they played.
So how conservative will the Yankees be with their minor league system? Is everybody in play but Dominguez, or is Spencer Jones somebody they're going to want to hold on to? How much are they willing to go for it with their prospects?
Okay, I've not heard from other teams that Dominguez is on the table. I have heard that the Yankees are open on Spencer Jones. Obviously, would have to be the right player. I'm sure you guys, heard the news initially broken by Jesse Rogers that Garrett Crochet, his representatives, his camp, signaling to the industry that, yeah, he would like to be traded to another team, but if he's traded, he's not going to agree to pitch in the postseason unless he gets a contract extension. It mirrors what Josh Hader did with the Milwaukee Brewers and the Padres, which is basically say, look, if you're not going to invest in my future, if you're not going to share the risk, then I'm not going to blow way past my innings totals, and you got to give me an extension. There are some teams that I've spoken to that, have sort of balked at that idea, but I do wonder, if, in fact, he is going to be traded just because there's such a need. The Dodgers, for example, have been looking hard for starting pitching, and they would not be afraid of a high price. But Spencer Jones would be the type of guy that I think would have to anchor any kind of deal for Garrett Crochet if the Yankees got involved in that, and that has been one of the areas that they've talked about.
I heard you say this earlier on a show as well. I'm flabbergasted. You sign a contract, you're pitching the whole year, and if that year involves going to the playoffs, then you have to pitch in the playoffs. And maybe that tells you a little bit something about the player. I would really be worried if a player said, I'm not going to pitch in the postseason unless you guarantee me money in the future. It's unbelievable. I know that the players have a lot of the power, but now they're running the industry if you can make demands like that.
Well, and it really does mirror, what's happening in college. And as I mentioned, the comparison with Hader before, and when I reported on that story, the name that was brought up often was Dallin Betances. And more players, since that Hader article came out early this year, I've spoken to more players, especially relievers, who really have come to believe, look, we can't. You can't just expect us to run us into the ground and take the ball every day if we don't have some sort of guarantee. Now, I'm not, endorsing what Garrett Crochet is looking for, but I would say, this is someone who hasn't, thrown before this year more than 54 innings in any season. He's already at 110. There obviously be some concern for a guy who had Tommy John surgery 4 years ago. And, unlike CeCe Sabathia in 2008, after he was traded to the Brewers and agreed to pitch every fourth day, Garrett Crochet's feeling is, look, I'll be all in it with it if you're all into me.
Yeah, but imagine if 26 players felt like that.
Michael, no. And Michael, believe me, there are some teams that are turned off by this. But I've also had some executives say, yeah, I get it.
And that's why the business is in the position it's in. You get it. The guy's supposed to pitch. Now, Matt Harvey, he pitched through the playoffs. He pitched through the World Series.
Yep.
And he had Scott Boras as an agent. Imagine the hubris of I understand wanting to be taken care of, but imagine looking your teammates in the face and going, yeah, it's October, I'm out, boys.
Well, and that was part of what, Josh Hader had to live with for 3 years after he told the Brewers in the winter of 2020, look, you beat me in arbitration, but you're not willing to give me a long-term deal, so here are the rules. I'll only pitch 2 consecutive days, no more than that. I won't go more than 3 outs per outing. And as I say, I'm hearing that more privately from players that, that they're open to putting in conditions like that as they are used.
All right. Now, the Mets, to me, are fascinating, Buster. It wasn't supposed to be about this year. And now it's all of a sudden become about this year. Have they played well enough that Stearns is going to pivot and maybe be more willing to give up more than maybe he wanted to at the deadline?
I don't know. Based on what I'm hearing today about what they're looking for, it's stuff around the margins,
okay,
right? And they're going to be buy opportunities for any team that's willing to take on a little bit of cash. And since they're way over the luxury tax threshold, that might be what it comes down to. It might be that another team might say, "Look, we're trying to save a little bit of money. This player is available. Would you be willing to take those dollars?" Because, what I'm hearing today is they're looking for improvements around the margins. I would imagine that involves some bullpen. But with so many teams this year, I think, hurting financially, it's expected that teams that are willing to take on money, they're going to have an advantage in this trade market. And the question all summer has been, would they trade Pete Alonso? David Stearns has lived that sort of thing in the past when he traded Hader to the Padres. I can't imagine that would be anything he would entertain now, given how well the team has played, because even if they aren't confident that they're going to be able to sign Pete Alonso to a long-term deal, the fact is it would shake up the clubhouse. It would lead to a lot of second-guessing about what the Mets are doing if they were to trade him now and take advantage of his value in a market which really is starved for offensive players.
So you've seen a lot of the Yankees because they've been on ESPN an awful lot. You were there for the Yankee-Met game as well. I mean, do you think this team is a couple of trades away from being a team that can win a championship? Because there are a lot of issues here, Buster.
Yeah, I think they're if they get like 3 great players, I don't think they're a couple of average players away, or as we were talking about the Mets, potentially adding around the margins. They need to add really good players, like an Isaac Paredes. That might move the needle, right? He's a guy who would certainly help the lineup and add some depth. A Tanner Scott, an Estevez, those are really good players. But I think if they do work around the margins in the end and wind up not necessarily upgrading significantly, I think it's going to be short. If we go back to that 2000 season, Brian Cashman made a number of moves during the course of that year. But let's face it, if you don't add a player of the impact of David Justice, right, then it's not going to work out, right? I mean, the Luis Sojo's, with all due respect to him, if that's the sort of player you're getting now, the Yankees clearly need more than that, with the depth of the lineup being such an issue.
But is that type of player available? I mean, we talk about Luis Rengifo. That's not equal to David Justice. That's a nice piece, but what's the big piece that's out there? Maybe we don't know. Maybe it'll shake loose without us even knowing, and Brian makes the deal, but I can't picture. I know the Yankees like Yandy Diaz. You think that falls under the heading of somebody that moves the needle?
Well, Paredes does for me. I think Paredes is a really good offensive player potentially. Really aggressive. He hits for power. He's got experience. He's not going to be afraid in a pennant race. For me, that would be someone who potentially has some value. And look, if you got Diaz and Paredes, yeah. But I think that's kind of where the Yankees are right now. This can't be a minor move type situation. They got to rip the Band-Aid off, because this is a win-now season. In this only year, perhaps, of having Soto and Judge batting back-to-back in their lineup.
Is there any conversation that'll be anything other than money for Soto when he hits free agency?
Well, I think all of it depends on what he really wants. And Don, I think I've told you, it just reminds me so much of when Alex Rodriguez was headed into free agency, where he wound up signing that $252 million deal with the Texas Rangers, biggest deal ever. And within 2 weeks, he did an interview with the New York Post saying, I really, all things being equal, I wish I had signed with the Mets. In the end, Juan Soto, I think, is going to make a choice between what he experienced with the Yankees and maybe what he values with the Yankees versus taking a bigger offer. I don't think the Yankees will have the biggest offer in free agency this fall. We'll see. But the idea of them being the team that gives Soto, who in his early and mid-30s might be more suited to a DH type role, $150 million more than Aaron Judge, just don't see it. I just don't see them going that far. Maybe they do, but it would surprise me.
That's what really worries me, because I brought up the A-Rod situation earlier in the show too. Texas was a dumpster fire. He went where they paid him the most money, and I believe that Juan Soto and Scott Boras are in lockstep on this. He's turned down an offer that was really representative from the Nationals. He loved it there. I think it's going to come down to who offers him the most money.
If we had to guess today, that would be my guess as well.
And that doesn't make him a bad guy. I'm not saying he's a bad guy for that.
Exactly. Totally his prerogative. Totally his prerogative. But, you and I know, and Alex, probably if you had Alex on the show and you asked him about it, he would say if he had to do it over again, he would have made a different choice.
And you just wonder what the Mets mentality is going to be, because on the one hand, you've got Stearns, who's probably someone that is loath to give more money than he believes somebody is worth. And then Steve Cohen, who might want to make the big splash of all splashes. And certainly the way that they freed up money in free agency for this offseason with the one-year contracts, you would think they lean on making a huge offer. Obviously, you would think an owner wins a face-off, Buster, but at the end, is Steve Cohen going to listen to Stearns, or is Stearns going to listen to Steve Cohen?
Well, David Stearns has to listen to Cohen because he signs the checks. And in the end, I don't know a general manager that would turn down an owner saying, yeah, I'm willing to pay Juan Soto to come to my team. In the end, and I think Steve has demonstrated also, he takes responsibility for some of this stuff. He's not one of these owners who's running behind the scenes and blaming the general manager for these whopper contracts, kind of like Artie Moreno of the Angels does.
Well, it's weird how things age, right? Now nobody's complaining about the Lindor contract.
Right, exactly.
Now, Lindor, people are talking about in the MVP discussion. I think that's Ohtani's unless he gets hurt. But I can easily see him finishing the top 4, can't you?
And I can see him actually ascending into where he might actually overtake Ohtani because, no designated hitters ever won that award in his league for a reason. Because you are competing against players who can compete on or add value on two sides of the ball. Lindor has statistically been one of the 2 or 3 best shortstops. Now, if Mookie Betts hadn't had his hand broken, he was going to win the award. He was the runaway favorite at that point. It would have been tough for anybody to catch him in terms of his statistical value, but Lindor has been remarkable. And you've talked to Buck Showalter, and he would tell you that in the time that he managed Lindor, the one thing that he really valued is every single day that guy posts up. He comes in every day. At the beginning of the year when he wasn't hitting well, he comes in, he's got a smile on his face, he's ready to go to work. When he's dinged up, when he's dealing with injuries, minor, he shows up. And during the course this year, after Carlos put him in the leadoff spot, he has been a different player.
So the other topic of conversation is, what is Alonso going to get? Could the price come down enough that the Mets might revisit bringing him back?
I think so. If you just look at the way first basemen have been valued, look, it's over a decade, I believe, since the last time a first baseman got $200 million. I mean, that just doesn't happen anymore. After the Miguel Cabrera and Joey Votto contracts, in recent years, you had Paul Goldschmidt got like 135 million. Freddie Freeman got $160 million with the Dodgers, but a lot of that is deferred without interest, which brings down the real value closer to $140 million. So the idea that a team would go over $200 million, I'd be surprised. All it takes is one. We were shocked a few winters ago when the Rockies gave Chris Bryant probably about $100 million more than any other team did. But the market right now just does not value first baseman the way that it used to.
Sunday, ESPN, Sunday Night Baseball, Yankees and the Red Sox. Yankees start a very tough 6 games right here, Buster, that could really define where they're going even before the trade deadline. I mean, if you drop a 1-5 in here in these 6 games, there's reason for panic. I know the schedule gets a lot easier after that, but they've lost to everybody, Buster, so it's hard to say the schedule gets easier.
Yep.
The teams on the schedule might say, oh, look, we're playing the Yankees.
The last 7 weeks, as you guys know, the only team with the worst record in baseball are the White Sox, who are now tanking the rest of the year.
Right.
And that says something, which is why I don't know what your reaction to what Aaron Boone said after the game on Wednesday night. It was the most angry that I've seen him. There certainly is a high degree of frustration within the organization about how they're playing. I'm also with you, Michael, is that I'm not sure how it's going to turn around. The stars on the team, given the makeup of the roster right now, they're the ones who have to turn it around. They again, as Aaron Judge did in that 62 home run season, it felt like for the month of August he carried that team, lifting them on a daily basis to winning, and it feels like that's what they're faced with now. And the scary thing from the Yankees' perspective is they're playing a team that is equally as desperate as they are right now in the Red Sox, who've come out of the All-Star break having lost 5 out of 6 games. This is, it's a high-intensity series because of what these teams have, done over the last week.
One final thing. So you spoke about what he said after the game on Wednesday, and I watched it intently, but I don't have an answer to this. Maybe you do. Who was he mad at? Was he mad at the writers for asking the question? Is he mad at his team? Who's he mad at? Who was he angry with?
Boy, first off, I wasn't in the room, so I don't know who he was looking at when he said it, but it felt like that he was frustrated. To me, it felt like he was frustrated with the fact that they're in a position where he's answering these questions.
Right, and I look at it and say all that frustration should be taken out on his team. Maybe sending a message to the team through the post game, but he can't be angry at the questions because the questions are right there if you're a decent reporter.
And I know, and Michael, and I know that there are people in the Yankees organization who want Aaron to be louder and more angry and having that directed at the players.
But it was interesting, guys, because even in him having that tone, and obviously it really stood out, we haven't seen that from him in a while. To me, and Buster, I'm curious for your thoughts, it almost seemed a little calculated. Like, I have this in my back pocket. I rarely do it. If things get bad enough in case of emergency break. But it didn't seem like directed towards anyone in particular. It was still sort of a series of general grievances.
I got to believe that he's heard the commentary on his post-game comments.
Right.
So, Peter, I can't tell you that you're wrong. That he probably understood going in there that after an ugly performance like that their Yankee fans are going to want to hear him louder and more angry than he's been in the past, and maybe that was it. But I do think he's among those who can't believe how poorly they're playing right now. And whether or not that's specifically aimed at particular players, I couldn't tell you that. I wouldn't put that out of the realm of possibility. Some degree of frustration where they are. But it's also possible, as you say, that he was, he just wanted to make sure Yankee fans understood that he was angry as well about the performance.
Good stuff. Enjoy the weekend. We'll see you on Sunday on ESPN. Thanks, Buster.
See you guys.
All right, so we opened the show doing the whole first segment on the Mets.
Right.
And there just wasn't a lot of traction. So I'm seeing on social media, they don't talk about the Mets. Well, you guys don't talk about the Mets. So we've cleared a lot of the lines now. So now's your chance. If you're a Met fan, hey, listen, if you're a Yankee fan, you're always welcome to call. Everybody is. 1-800-919-3776. If you want us to talk about the Mets, you've got to talk about the Mets. I mean, we can only talk about it to one, level, and then we're not going to talk to ourselves. If you're a Met fan, you want to celebrate what you think they should add, feel free. If you're a Yankee fan, feel free. Now, when we get back, I do have one Olympic question to ask Peter.
Oh, for me?
For you.
Is it about Snoop Dogg?
It is.
I knew it.
How did you know that?
Well, because I'm not a gymnastics expert. I mean, it had to be something up my alley.
Right. I need to ask you guys. He specifically pointed at you, so.
Right, because I think I'm not doing this in a pejorative way. Peter has a better take on this or feel for it than maybe I do and maybe Don does. Because it's a little confusing to me. That's all I'll say.